Hi, I'm Susan Maxwell. I write slipstream and speculative fiction, as well as fantasy adventure for younger readers. I will read an abridged version of a story from a recently published collection, Fluctuation in Disorder. The story is called Fleeting Fluctuation in Disorder. In the month that I have worked here, my sensitivity to the room's mood had built up, or conversely worn away, so that the slightest shift in the thin winter sun rang like a breath on an exposed nerve. Every day has that indefinable moment when it is done, and the evening gathers, twilight draws in, and so the night. In spaces such as these exhibition rooms, with everything measured to the millimetre and labelled to the last word, the indefinable moment of transition is pushed centre stage. This day was the day, D-Day, the last job day. Over and back, pacing the room in soundless shoes and smiling. Over and back, murmured answer to a whispered question, nodding. The ladies, down the hall to the right. The restaurant already, you greedy little beggar. Through the door at the top of the room. Over and back, over and back. The capillary motion of daylight across the pristine glass of the exhibition cases, marking the progress of today towards its catalytic hour. Over and back. Yes, they do sell miniature models of the stuffed wildlife on display. Over and back. Everyone wanted the gift shop, even me, in a manner of speaking, the key to the sweet shop, the code to open the storage bay, and Fann's list in my pocket. Over and back. We had been busy today. All the islands in this archipelago are long deserted, but some crony of the Premier got millions to build bridges to the island. Tourists, they said. For those of us unenchanted by Cuddy Duck or Kittiwake, there is Christianson House and its museum, the target of today's visitors from one of the coastal public schools. This was usual, apparently, in the week before their mid-term break. That none of them had been seasick was less usual, an attendant had told me bitterly at coffee break. I could hear the teenagers progress between the exhibition cases in the eastern room. The noise rolled between the cases and the surly silences of the goths and emos who were unimpressed with everything, even the first edition of Frankenstein, even the glass case displaying love tokens, mostly made of hair, through the ages. Sound and silence do not mix here. Over and back. Patience was difficult today. Finally, Advent. I wasn't even looking at the window, and I could tell. It happens when the last smear of sun slips its hold on the window-sill. The temperature drops, but what really changes is tension. Not in a psychological sense, no. These curated spaces are ordered and harmonious, and they breed quietude. It is not relaxation, but adjustment. The dissolution of light into grains acts as a tuning fork or as a first violin, to which keynote every voice and every instrument adjusts itself. Everything of the day thickens, and can be lifted like a lactoderm and removed at the right time. This happens every day and everywhere, but a museum that takes the quotidian from its natural setting heightens these things, change and silence. Time now, ladies and gentlemen. Finish up rinsing your young and culture. I have work to do. Waiting again between the exhibition room and the storage bays that had been my target all this time. The door in the vestibule had a tiny squint of glass in it. I waited among the ruptured packing cases and empty pedestals and their shadows, while the anonymous pipes gurgled and hissed. I took out the keys and murmured the code. That, by my calculation, was a day and a half ago. The storage bay was packed and difficult to negotiate. The electric lights ran on a dedicated generator. The vestigial windows had been bricked up, though there were lights in every corner, bright but with an uncomfortably refracted quality. Glass cases reflected again and again in their opposite number, partially visible contents overlain with another and another. As soon as I stepped inside, I was uneasy. There was a moment, though, a few seconds before I reached behind me and pulled shut the door. Nothing fancy, a familiar, plain few seconds of crystalline clarity that occur when the inevitable is revealed for what it is, a series of choices, each choice obscuring its opposite. It was not even a revelation of that obscured opposite. All that is illuminated is the fact that the plan is not an inevitability, but a possibility, and subject to mutation. Nothing was beyond recall, but I shut the door behind me. I didn't check for a handle because, well, you don't think, do you? When I shut the door, it was the word disorder that struck me, dislodging from some fold of my brain the school memory of a law of physics, all things moving from an ordered state to a disordered one. which made this chaotic place more advanced than that impeccably curated space I had just left. I ticked off from my list the specimens as I found them. In among the museum's passenger pigeons and the St. Stephen's Island wrens and Jamaican petrels crammed onto shelves and stacked on the floor, I found the hollow, dusty little exemplars of the buyer's parameters of covetousness, vermilion-winged this, ground-nesting that, puff-legged the other, in glass-fronted cases, dead and dusted for so long that the labels were ornate manuscripts, and it was almost a joy to rub them. I wondered if I should worry about tetanus. The dust from rusted locks was like a crust on my hands. The great auk was not in a case, but on a table. I set out the items I was taking, each one newly tagged with the coded reference we used for the clients. They were a faded crew, all right, fogged with dust and their colours leached, some of the feathers distinctly nibbled. The auk was the largest. It had white patches at its eyes, so it must have been killed in summer. I did not know how I knew that. I read the beautiful copperplate script of its expansive label, telling me the bird was one of the last breeding pair killed on this island. When the egg they were incubating was smashed too, the auk became extinct. That was a moment too, a couple of seconds at most. There is nothing in this museum that is a monument to that transformation from a world with auks to a world without. The storage room being so much bigger and so much more chaotic than Flann had predicted, come midnight I was only 2/3 of the way through. That the door had no handle on the inside was too peculiar to worry about. I would provision myself for the night, finish up in the morning, and send Flann a text to explain. The night spent in the storage room was inevitable, and the silence was its essential property. I don't sleep well at the best of times. Being in a sealed room on a cold night on a practically deserted island with several continents' worth of dead animals was not the best of times. At least I did find a couple of blankets, the felted sort but used by furniture removings, and some packing straw. The depth of night, when it came, was freezing. I huddled under the blankets, picturing material treats with which to reward myself on release, to distract me from the suddenly pressing material discomforts. I was grateful for the food, limited as it was to snacks that hikers carry, more so for the bottle of water, and even more so for the fact that I had unearthed a jerry can with a wide mouth. A gallon it held, and the kidneys only produce about a litre a day. I turned out most of the lights, made myself comfortable. My eyes adjusted to the dark, and without meaning to, I glanced around. The few lights I had left on were still glinting on the powdery eyes of the specimens. The auk stood head and dusty shoulders above its fellow captives. It did not matter which way I turned, there was the army of the dead. I wondered if all of them were now extinct. Did it make any real difference if they were? There were still birds and sea mammals and reptiles and invertebrates. It can be argued, I said to myself, that there are still auks in the world, and dodos and golden toads and honey creepers, wrasses, tree snails, that are the preserved specimens. Here before me, in this cold room, so cold my bones are breaking. Here I can see many of the properties of such things are extant still. Their form and colour, for example, the length of their flight feathers, the morphology of their feet, but not the way they walk, or their peculiarities of mating ritual. That's gone. The mechanics through which their evolution was linked to their prey, or an original whose deadly marks they mimicked, that's gone too. A couple of hours' dreamless snoring set me up. I felt smug about being prepared for any situation, with basic food and water. I was confident that Flann would worry. Surely he would worry when he did not hear from me this morning. He always knew someone to bribe. I concentrated on making sure we were ready to run with our haul when the chance came. I eked out my supplies and also my occupation, stringing out for the whole day my exploration of foreign lands through their relicts. I went shelf by shelf, listing everything that we could flog to a collector. My hands tingled at these treasures. I whispered exclamations, made plans. Flann had dealt with me fairly in the past. He would be in clover. I could hear him now, corks popping, phone buzzing discreetly. At the same time, as the day spooled out slowly, there was an accumulated uneasiness. To begin with, the storage bay was massive, bay after bay and shelf after shelf, packed with variations on the theme of extinction. There was a Chinese river dolphin overhead, a rhino-sized turtle, a stuffed snake. There was a 12-foot moa, neck stretched out like an angry gander. I made my rounds of the room, concentrating on details, unstacking and restacking boxes and cases twice and 3 times over. Periodically I returned to the door with its smooth, cool panels, but never a handle could I find. It was very warm, too, and not quite as silent as I would like. The second evening fell, and I returned to the blanket and the straw, and to wakeful, uneasy occupation of a bed that felt more and more like a display case. It could not literally be true that all the specimens were facing me. I left only one light on, so that I could see fewer eyes. Of the assembled items I was contracted to take, the auk was the tallest. White patches gleamed, and its eye glittered, even under its dust. Its label told me how the birds were pursued, one strangled, and one held prisoner in a boat for 3 days before being stoned to death as a witch. Such an intimate way to commit murder, strangulation. The auk was about the size of a toddler, so this was no quick seize and snap. But once seized, the snap must have been harder won. Even immobilized, the bird must have struggled. Hard to imagine looking at the auk now, stationary and with the harmless, defenseless air of the eternal victim. Who knew what it might have been in life? The early English and the Norse called it a razor bill, a spear bird. Is that what provoked this most personal of killing? The hooked beak dowsing for blood, and the hurt, enraged sailor pinioning the tiny wings, the neck seized as firmly as an untethered sail, anger driving the throttling fingers as hard as cold rocks, and the palpitating heart battering and shuddering in its downy velvet. The other auk trussed by the feet, in the boat, starving before the stoning started and meaningless death advanced. The odd thing about this place is that each time I ventured through there were parts I seemed to have missed. I hunted around again in the illogical but electrifying hope that I would find the handle on the door or another door, that I could escape somewhere, Atlantis, Narnia, Xanadu, anywhere. In searching I found only more display cases, including a small one on a trolley. The glass was broken and it was empty. The glass was broken from the inside. Evening fell again. I had very little water left and very little food. Silence is one of the ways in which these animals are extinct, now that I think of it. This thought was company. It had the reassurance of a bromide. Sound as well as presence removed from the world. The particular scuttle of an animal, the particular voice. The snuffling of dim-sighted animals who specialized in snouts. I remembered a dream, a chase, a crackling shell, a crunching of the half-formed chick, the moment not only of death but of extinction. That's another thing about humans. The death of a human is a tragedy. The extinction of another species is survival of the fittest. The generator began a droning purr. I knew it. It's about to run down. I knew it. Of course, I had a pencil-sized torch ready in my hand, but when the dark did come, when it seized me, I dropped the torch, and the length of time it took it to hit the floor and clatter was enough time, enough silence, for me to let fall the sound of shock. My heart was pulsating like a trapped bird. Darkness had joined the silence. From some sunken fold in my fear-shrunken brain there leaked this, not fact so much as resonance, from my dewy youth when I had confidence in my grasp on things. Einstein said that God did not play dice, despite having fairly much proved that he did, but Boltzmann before him had promulgated a hard-bitten gambler of a deity. It is improbable, said the bold Boltzmann, that all the particles of warm air in a room will gather in one corner. Improbable that an ordered universe exists, but it is not mathematically impossible. There could be a fluctuation from disorder to order, and I would have been less surprised at the fleeting appearance of a disembodied entity, or terrified by the realization that I was the only self-aware being in existence, than I was at what actually happened in the dark. In that cubicle of a place as measureless, dark, and silent as a well, there was a sound, a boom, a harsh cry a raven might make when you don't know whether it's aggression or amour. But that was just the keynote, the tuning fork. There was no mistaking what followed. A choir of lost voices. They had the whole range, from basso profundo to trills so high they were not so much a sound as a shimmer, a sparkle on the unforgiving darkness. It was dark as pitch, no sound or shape to act as a pole star whence I might determine my longitude amongst these dead. The mournful honking like a foghorn might have been the moa. Something sounded like a stoned woodpecker. a wooden sphere rattling down through a hollow branch, purrings, cluckings. It was an April of birdsong, sweet showers of duets, drenching coloratura warbles, clicks and hoots and honks and bittern booms, tunneling like roots beneath. Then all the small chirruping fowl ceased their melody, falling instantly silent, like the bereft, angry shriek of a raptor. The noise rolled on, and I listened and tried to rise above it, deny it. Curated wildlife is not expected to hold any secrets. They have been measured and tagged. Look at them. They've got a label. No autonomy, but a lovely label. There must be an explanation. No explanation revealed itself, but finally there was the transformative moment when what was happening, being beyond denial or subjugation, became meaningful. The Copernican principle, that we are not privileged observers, applies to planets and galaxies and auks and Zanzibar leopards and thieves. If the auk is here, why not me? There will still be humans, even if I don't get out of this room. Technology can reproduce the sounds a dead thing made by looking at the way its voice box was constructed. We will be able to reproduce the sounds of the nightingale or the whale when they have finally been extinguished. Scientists could reproduce my voice box, but not the words that came babbling out unheard, of my home, of Heritage Series paints, and her hair like corn silk, reclaimed wood for the floors and polished granite. It was not a comforting moment. Those that are truly transformative never are. The ancient Greeks drew a distinction between quantitative time and qualitative time, the right time, opportune time. How long have I been here? Have I been here long enough? I have chronos and kairos enough for such thoughts now. I literally know neither the day nor the hour, and the noise goes on and more voices join in, and they meld together in a soundscape so crowded that no perspective can be found. I have the space in which I lie and nothing more, not courage, not hope. It is the twilight of those who thought they were gods, and the hammer will fall where it will, without regard to the innocence or complicity of those beneath. More than anything it has borne in upon me with a conviction I've not known since childhood, that I am of no consequence. I am already smashed to atoms, nothing left but bones and a jerrycan of piss, nameless as a coursed hare or a baited bear. Silence is a property of death.
Thank you for watching this reading. Find more Indie Author Reading Library performances on our YouTube channel, along with our Meet the Author interviews and recordings of previous panels. Hit subscribe to get notifications for every new video. Find us at glasgow2024.org and as Glasgow in 2024 on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram. Check out our cool merch on redbubble.com/people/Glasgow2024/shop and consider joining by emailing volunteers at glasgow2024.org.